Thanks a lot for coming to our talk. Our talk is 25 techniques to gather threat intel and track actors. It's a talk by Proofpoint colleagues. Sun Huang is the main contributor of this particular research. He's done most of the groundwork, and he will be staying behind after the talk, so feel very welcome to stay around and get to know him, and we can exchange intel and our experiences with these techniques.
Okay. Hi guys, thanks for coming. My name is Sun Huang. I'm a senior threat researcher at Proofpoint. This talk Wen will be presenter. I hope you guys enjoy this talk. Thank you.
Okay. All right. My name is Wayne. I was co-founder to Armorize Technologies in 2013. Proofpoint acquired Armorize Technologies, so now I'm VP of Engineering at Proofpoint, and one of my roles is to lead a team and study all of these actors really closely. And when we say study all these actors, we want to know who they are, what tools they use, we want to have all their source code, we want to know exactly what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Which means we don't want just to look at their malware and reverse their exploit and understand what their malware and exploits are doing. We want to understand everything that they do in their daily operations. So over the past few years after joining Proofpoint, we have given lots of talks on various very well-known actors, and we're able to disclose a lot of information. So one question that we always get asked is, how do you guys find all this stuff? Right? You can't find all this stuff by just looking at the malware or by reversing. And so this talk we're going to be sharing with you 25 techniques that we often use. And for every technique, we'll give you some examples of how we actually applied that particular technique against some actor and what intel we were able to extract by using that technique. So showcase 25 methods for gathering threat intel for over 30 real cases, mostly against web-based command and control servers operated by actors. And why are we able to do it? Because actors are quite careless with their server configuration and with the way they write their code. How do we do it? Pen testing, application code review. And finally, we'll show that intelligence gathering is key to an intelligence-based security strategy and make a conclusion. All right, on to method one. Now today there's a lot of sandboxes. So for all of us security researchers, we just on a daily basis end up with huge lists of C2 URLs, right? Command and control URLs that are generated by these sandboxes. So now we have just lots and lots of URLs that are being accessed by malware that's captured in our sandboxes. And from these URLs, our investigation starts. Method one, analytics beacons. Some of these URLs, command and control URLs or C2 URLs that you have in your hands will be analytics beacons that these malware. So when malware calls home, they will be linking to their command and control panel or command and control server to upload stolen data and also to retrieve further commands to execute on the infected endpoint. At the same time, sometimes they will also push out a beacon to a public analytics service because these actors do not want to maintain and run their own analytics server, so they're using something like Google Analytics to just keep track and analyze their victims. And so through our captured URLs in our sandboxes, for example, we found the Nerdjax analytics page, which was open to the public. Nerdjax is a Superfish variant that was shipped in some models of some vendors' notebooks in the past and became well known, right? All right, so and from the analytics page, which is openly available, we learned that, they're actually targeting mostly Brazil out of everything else, and we started our Intel collection from that perspective. Okay, so Beacon Analytics. Method 2, open directories. Once you have all of those URLs, you can write a script to start to probe for open directories. And there are lots and lots of them. We'll give an example that we found with the CryptoWall actors. From their open directories that we discovered, we can see All right, so you can get their malware. You also can have a look. That sendmail.rar is their tool that they use to send out their spam, right? So you can get your hands on the tool just by finding their open directories. And on your right side, we have the Outlook email harvester directory, where their email harvester is harvesting all these victim emails from the infected endpoints, and then they're uploading it to their server, but that directory is open. So we can see that, for example, what we learned from here is that, all right, so they're absolutely grouping their campaigns according to location, and when these malware upload the extracted emails back to their command and control, it's stored in different folders such as Canada, France, Spain, United Kingdom, United States, right? So just from that, we understand which regions that they have been targeting at the time of this discovery. And another example is with Dridex 120, and they're targeting the UK. We had an open directory of all their files and their tools, and at the same time, you can see that in this directory, they have a list of all of the emails that they were targeting in UK. Get this off. All right. Magnifier is not being very friendly to me. Hold on. Come on. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so open directories apply to the Dridex 120 actor. Method 3, fuzzing common file names. So now you get a sense of what you can do with these URLs, right? You can run a fuzzer and start to just fuzz these URLs against very commonly found names. And again, we're successful with the Nerdjax group. We found a stats.php, which was openly accessible, no credentials required, and it's a part of their control panel. It was listing out their infection statistics. So we can see that, for example, they had a total of 6 million distributions. Their active infection in the past 15 days was about 238,000. Okay, and this was done through our fuzzer. Another successful example against the Ankh downloader actor, which was targeting Brazil at that time, we were able to find their point.php, which is their command and control URL, and we didn't know that they called it that, but we just fussed it out, and then we were able to access their command and control. So usually, when these actors build their botnets, they'll have a command and control server where all of their botnets are connecting back to, sending all the stolen data back to. And that server usually has a command and control panel. So one of our main targets is getting access to this command and control panel. That's one big target of ours when you're using these techniques. The other target that we want to get is many of these actors love to use what we call web shells alongside their own control panels to manage the servers. And what we mean by web shells are stuff like WSO shells, backdoors that provide as much feature as a shared hosting cPanel. Modify files, delete files, upload, download files, execute system commands, things like that. And because writing their own panel takes them quite some effort, so they would always, well, not always, but a lot of them leave some hidden shell, publicly available hidden shell somewhere for them just to easily be able to manage their servers. And so these would be our two targets. And this one we're showing that we're successful against the UNC-downloader group, and we found their command and control panel, which did not require authentication. So once we've hit that URL, we're directly able to access their command and control and get all of their statistics. And this, we had success also with the Loki Stealer, previously known as Pony. And this is not their command and control, but this is a web shell that they hid somewhere in their command and control server that we found. So we've given you examples of fuzzing URLs to get access to command and control panels as well as web shells. Method 4, all right? So now we've fuzzed all these URLs. We found open directories. We found command and control panels. We found web shells. But if at this stage you haven't identified where the command and control panel is, what that exact URL is, if you still couldn't figure it out, then you would have to start to understand the file structure, right? So we're not that lucky. We couldn't find where their command and control panel URL is, and we're going to have to do a little bit more work. We're going to have to understand their file structure. And one technique that we can use is Apache's server status module. For example, the Loki Password Stealer group turns this module on in their Apaches. And so when we found their command and control server, we were able to find slash server.status, and we're able to list out. I'm going to try to use the magnifier again. Hopefully this time it's not going to. All right. Okay, it's a little bit small. All right. So anyways, so what happens? So server status just lists out all of the HTTP requests to that server, right? So what you're gonna, we're going to assume that sometime the actor is going to log in, that there is a command and control panel somewhere, and sometime the actor is going to access that command and control panel and click on some buttons, and those buttons are going to trigger HTTP requests back to their server, and those requests are going to get logged in their server status module. And you can see here that we logged a GET request, and we're able to find from there, use that URL, and we found it's a quite newly developed control panel. It's Loki Password Stealer plus Loki Plus. And so when you click, so this is one control panel, and when you click on that plus menu, it actually takes you to another command and control panel based on the Neutrino bot. So there are two command and control panels integrated together. Relatively new stuff. And this was discovered through server status module of Apache. Another example, CryptoWall. The CryptoWall actors love this module. Leave it on, allows us to just constantly monitor all of their HTTP requests. Through that, initially we found a post request that led us right to the actual URL of their command and control. And this is CryptoWall. PHP error messages. We love PHP error messages, right? Just somehow trigger an error in their PHP code, and the code is going to dump out. If they turn it on, it's going to dump out all of the directory information. And so here, and this worked against a Trojan group that we were tracking. And so from there, and this, although it looks pretty simple, is their command and control. So again, from PHP errors, they turn it on. We looked at the URLs. We figured out which one was caused by the actors logging into their command and control panel, and we found their command and control panel. Not everybody use Python. Some actors like to use PHP. Some actors do use Python, right? And so if you kind of realize that, okay, this actor is using Python for their command and control server, you can use Django. If they turn the Django debug on, and who turned it on when we were researching this? Asprox. They were one of the super active spam actors a few years back. Turned it on, allowed us to list out their URL mapping, and that's a feature for the Django debug mode. And from their URL mapping, we're able to map out their Python API. And so remotely, by calling that API, we figured out, all right, so what were these guys doing? They ran their marketplace, their own underground marketplace, to buy in mass volume shared hosting cPanel admin username and passwords, and also WordPress admin username and passwords. It was all traded on their marketplace. They paid quite some money on it, and because we were able to call their Python API, we were able to see, for example, to your right, we were able to see all of the password files that was being traded on that platform. So eventually, we figured out that they own, and after they get these, they buy these cPanel admin usernames or WordPress usernames. They try to get into the website and inject a WSO web shell. And we found that the number of WSOs that they own by unique domain name was more than 3 million. By unique file name, almost 8 million. SMTP accounts, almost 2 million, right? So they own a lot of assets. And by the way, guys, a lot of people think this group is dead. They're not spreading malware anymore, but they're not dead. They're doing porn fraud since beginning of last year. I bet you nobody knew that. So once we get familiar with their file structure and able to reverse out their infrastructure, we can then almost forever track these actors and act before they actually launch a new campaign or a new type of attack. Okay, progress. Now we know the C2's file structure and perhaps already found some command and control. And as you saw in some previous screenshots, some command and control, all right, we found it, it's there, but it needs authentication, right? So how do we get ourselves authenticated into that command and control panel? One technique that we can look for is insufficient authentication. And for us, it worked against the Handsitter downloader actor. And what they did was whenever they're not happy with your password, they're not happy with your IP, they'll not authenticate you, right? They'll log you out, or they won't let you log in. But their code was written so poorly that all they did was change the HTTP status to a 302 redirect. But all of the content is there. So by using Burp Proxy and just change that HTTP 302 code to a 200, we surely enough had access to their command and control. Okay. And you would wonder if a lot of actors are so poor at their code. Well, we have at least another example where we succeeded using this technique, the Android Marcher malware actor. And we were able to get access to the command and control this way by changing the HTTP return code. And we found out that this actor, they were spreading Android banking Trojans and phishing for online banking passwords, and also stealing banking SMS from Android phones. Okay, so let's assume that through some techniques, we have authenticated ourselves into a command and control panel. So we've identified the C2 URL, and we've authenticated ourselves. Can we expand laterally? Is there a need to expand laterally? There certainly is a need, because we found out that some actors love to host many command and control panels on the same server. And Keybase, for example, they're mostly operated by Nigerians. This actor loves to run multiple C2 C2 control panels on a single server. And so we can use a technique called session fixation. They have this vulnerability. So what happens is when you log into any one of their panels, they set a session variable called logged in to true. So once you're logged into one of their panels, actually you're just automatically logged into all of their panels. This vulnerability is called session fixation, and it's worked for us against the Keybase actor. And we're able to, and this is how their command and control panel looks like, their admin panel. And they have many of this panel on their server that we just laterally expanded to. And now, when we get access to their control panels, it's a lot of interesting things that we see. For example, we were wondering, what these guys were up to, and because they somehow install their own bot on their own system, and the bot's taking screenshots and sending it to the server, and we just click and see all the screenshots, we're able to follow what they were doing, every day. And so we were looking at their screenshots, realized that, okay, this is targeted business email compromise, this actor. This is what they focused on. BEC is when you target a business, you and you hack the emails of both a buyer and a seller, and you're just monitoring, you spend the time, you have humans, and you're monitoring their exchanges, and right when payment's about to happen, you see somebody send an invoice, let's say, I'm the seller, I send an invoice to a buyer, and both of our emails are being monitored by these guys, and they're using chat to just, you can see all their exchanges on chat. The buyer receives the invoice, they'll very quickly get that invoice, modify it, send a second email, seemingly to be from the seller and say, sorry, we're changing our wiring instructions, right? Please, because of this reason and that, please wire it to this bank account instead. It's not that easy to detect because they're not spreading malware, they're not spreading exploits, and it's highly manual, right? Just another email coming in. And so we're able to see, like this chat, you can't see it, but it's saying, hey, they just sent an invoice, right? So we have 4 days to get this done because in 4 days they're going to pay. So you can see all their communication through their command and control. How about directly guessing the password? What if I don't want to use any of these techniques, just guess their password, right? It works. It worked against the BlackMoon-KR banker actor. They had a login interface, and password was root. Very easy, type it in, And by the way, it's an Asian. We stare at these panels so much. It's just by looking at the layout, I know it's an Asian panel somehow, because I don't know, different countries just have different tastes for design, and it just looks very Asian. Okay, and it worked also for Cerber, Sage actually. They're a well-known actor, and again, WSO shell. We got ourselves in. We had a backdoor, a web shell into their entire infrastructure. I want to take a guess at their numeric password. Anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. Close. It's 1. All right. So that saved a lot of time. All right, and we were able to track them for ages just by typing in 1. And we found out, for example, wow, they were using these in the cloud online services to help them verify. This actor is special in that they put their malware, they try to put their malware in legitimate websites and then email out, links pointing to those malware for people to download. And when most actors do this, how they put that piece of malware onto websites is by, like Asprox, in underground markets, buying off shared hosting or WordPress admin username and passwords. This group actually has the ability to hack themselves. So they actually perform hacking themselves and try to compromise the websites that they want to inject malware into. That makes them special. The other thing that made them special was, for example, they were buying SMTP passwords. And when most actors buy SMTP passwords, they have this tool, this script, that would validate every single password entry, right? They would try to authenticate every entry against that particular SMTP server and see if that entry is working or not. What they're doing is they're paying somebody to do it. And they're hosting this service, a paid service, to help you validate the text file that you just bought with SMTP username and passwords. And so that was new to us. We saw a lot of those tools. We never saw an online service being offered commercially to these actors. And speaking of passwords, how else can we get the admin password? Let's say we don't want to use these techniques, too complicated, try to guess passwords, couldn't get through. What else can we do? One thing that we could look for is hard-coded passwords or download config files. And it worked for us with what we call the IRC bot actor. They're not very well known, so nobody has given them a name yet. In their malware, we reverse out that they do two things. After they steal data from compromised endpoints, they use FTP to upload data back to their FTP servers. And for the FTP username and password, they do two things. They either hard-code it inside their malware, or they hard-code a URL inside their malware, and then the malware go and download a file from that URL that has the FTP username and password in it. Right? So by reversing the malware that you have at hand, a lot of times you will get hard-coded credentials that you can use. And so we're able to, because we have there, and this group, we believe, doesn't have a command and a C2 panel. They don't have a panel, they just use FTP. But we have their FTP password, so we get access to all their files, and we can see just who exactly are they targeting and are they infecting. Method 11. Okay, so we just talked about reversing. And what goes in hand in hand with reversing is, how about code review, right? If we're able to reverse out stuff, useful stuff, how about let's try a code review? Well, okay, interesting. But then we have to get their source code first. To do that, what we can do is, for example, we'll show you a few techniques, but one thing that we can do is, for example, fuzz folder names, right? Folder name.zip usually may contain a backup tar of that entire directory. And also, so what we do is we have some fuzzer scripts that we wrote that tries to, fuzz folder names or URLs, just trying to download stuff. And when you're able to download stuff, a lot of times you will hit upon source code. And the other common way is in previous examples we showed you that sometimes you can get access to their web shells, right? And a web shell is just a remote management interface. You can download every single file. So usually once you get access to a web shell, what you would be doing is downloading their source code. Okay. And then you can carry out a code review process against their source code. And one thing you can look for is cross-site scripting. And this, when we did an experiment, now you ask, does cross-site scripting really work? How effective is it? Conceptually, you can alert something, but can you really steal somebody's cookie and then use it to authenticate yourself? So what we did was we did it against this group, the ISR stealer actor. They have cross-site scripting in their code. They weren't checking for the variables, the get variables that they were using. They were checking for the user agent string. So we're able to cross-site them. And it's a persistent cross-site. So what happens is their panel allows uploading of stuff, and they store some data into database. So when their bots upload stuff, right, they store the uploaded data into database. They check for the user agent string, and the agent string is special. So they figure if they're checking for that, then they'd be safe. So that means we can cross-site them. The experiment that we did, we found that this actor had a large number of control panel instances. They had 170 panels on their different assets. So we wrote a script, injected persistent cross-site to get their cookies. The experiment lasted 2 weeks. We received 103 cookies that allowed us to successfully authenticate into their control panel. So the success rate was 60% over the 2 weeks. That was pretty high. And by looking at the data, we saw that 66,000 victims have had their data stolen by this group. They're also mostly in Nigeria. Method 13, backdoor. When we do code review, one interesting thing that you want to look for that may not exist in code written by normal people are deliberately injected backdoors. And we found an interesting one in the Zeus, Robot, Panther, Gauss groups. Somehow these groups use the same version of Zeus that they probably bought from somebody, and somebody injected a backdoor into that version of Zeus. We never figured out who. But the code was there. It was just 2 lines, very simple. PHP, get a variable, eval it. And so if you know where that code is, you have arbitrary file access and command execution in their infrastructure. And this lasted for a very long time. We were able to track them for over many years. And so here is how that shell worked. So we were listing out their directory here. Okay, so this is looking for backdoors inside actor's source code. Method 14, remote command execution due to coding error. And we found that the Zeus, Citadel, or IC11 actor had a vulnerability that allowed remote code execution. You can see here that it's constructing commands, and it's using the variable files to construct a command called CLI, and then executes that command. that file variable hasn't been sanitized or checked before it being used to construct a command, and that makes a remote command execution. And so by popping up our burp, we filled in the files variable with our script, which echoed out PHP info to a file, and we loaded that file, boom, works. Which means then we can just upload a WSO shell or any web shell of our preference onto their server, and from then on, we have full access to their server. So that's remote command execution inside actor source code. Method 15, everybody knows about SQL injection, right? There's a lot of SQL injections in their code. Android off-fake malware, vulnerable to SQL injection. Very simple. The IMAY variable was used to construct their SQL command, wasn't sanitized before being used, didn't use prepared parameters for their SQL access, and so we were able to SQL inject them. So once we were able to SQL inject them, we can execute system command, upload files, or just rip out their database. Method 16. All right. So at this point, if some of these techniques succeeded, we probably have access to their admin control panel. We probably also have a shell in place that allows us just that offers complete ownership of their servers and infrastructure. But how about just rooting the server? What if we just want absolute control of their server? Okay, then what we can do, other techniques that we can do. One is, for example, this group, their C2 panel is in Java, so quite unique. And they were using HFS, which was vulnerable to remote command execution. So this vulnerability wasn't due to their code, but they were using vulnerable software. And we were able to just leverage that and remotely execute commands. And from there, we can then upload a shell. Or shell shock, very well-known vulnerability, and you'd be surprised. Sutra TDS is one of the most well-known TDSs that these actors just love to use, right? So they're using these TDSs to filter out unwanted IPs, to kind of act as a shield between their infrastructure and vendor scanners. So they use TDSs to only allow naive traffic to access their malware and attempt to block all access by security vendors, search engines, robots, and things like that. Sutra TDS was vulnerable to shell shock. So whichever actor was using TDS, we got a shell. Method 18, Java unserialized vulnerability. Fake Angry, for example, an Android piece of malware was vulnerable, was written in Java and had this vulnerability. Again, using unpatched, outdated software, and we will leverage that. Okay, so now let's say some of these techniques must have worked, and we can execute arbitrary commands. So basically, we own their infrastructure. What you will find at this point is it's still hard because you're just getting too much data, and there's so many actors, so many servers to analyze, right? How do you very quickly get an understanding of what this actor is doing? What are they about? What type of malware are they spreading? Is it still active? Things like that. One thing that works well for us is then to access their WebAlyzer or AWStat data. Because from these web logs, access logs, right, you would be able to see, all right, so you would immediately see, all right, so this particular URL is mostly accessed, it is most frequently accessed, so it's probably their heartbeat their command and control heartbeat from their botnet to this command and control panel. And it'll tell you a lot of things, and sometimes they host malware to be downloaded directly on this command and control server. And so if a lot of malware gets downloaded from that single URL, it's going to be a very frequently accessed URL, and it will also show up in these web analytics. So what we would do is we would take their log. If they have these turned on, we'll just pop up the report, have a look. Or if we can get access to their web server logs, we'll pump it through a traffic analyzer and get a report. Okay, method 20. Some more complicated or complex techniques. Path traversal, magic paths. This is a malware that targets point of sale systems. And what they did was their code was vulnerable to arbitrary file upload or path traversal. And so we're able to upload a shell and also get access to their command and control panel. Now, let's talk about file upload vulnerabilities. There are 3 types of file upload vulnerabilities that you can look for, usually in these actors' infrastructure. We were successful with for example, Yahoo spam bot. They had an unrestricted file upload vulnerability. This was their panel. This is how their panel looks like. And it allowed the actor to upload newer versions of their malware binary onto this server for download. It has, if you look at the code, it's unrestricted. So they're not checking for the file extension, they're not checking for anything, right? So what you do immediately when you see that is upload a web shell and you're in. Another example too, Neutrino HTTP bot. This group, this is their control panel. And they had arbitrary, let me see. Okay, this is restricted. All right, skip. Okay, so let's talk about the Godox bot. Okay, let's do it. Okay, this is going to take some time, but made a video for you. Okay, so let's have a look. Okay, so we're looking at their panel code right now for their file upload feature. And we can see, all right, so it's checking for user agent string, and it's checking for your IP, right? So it does have checks. When you try to upload files onto this panel, through this panel, it's going to check whether your user agent string fulfills their criteria. It's also going to check for your IP. And you can only do multi-part, right? So content type, they're sensitive about content type. So they have quite a few checks in place, as we can see here. And the user agent, we can see the user agent string that they like. So when we implement our exploit, we would be using that particular user agent string. And of course, if at any time you fail their checks, they're going to log your IP into their database, and then they'll forever ban you. See all of that in their code. And so when we built the exploit, we would be just routing through anonymized IPs so that it's okay if we fail for a few times and they ban our IPs. So you can see here that, okay, they also care about HTTP referrer. The referrer cannot be null, but they don't need a particular referrer. So as long as there is a referrer, they're happy. Okay, so whenever they're not happy, they'll just give you a page not found error, right? As we can see here. Okay, so 404 not found. So this actor, they're implementing a lot of checks. They allow file upload. So now how do we, here's the file upload function. And how do we get past all of these checks? Okay, now, and be able to manipulate and be able to manipulate something, right? So what we want to manipulate is the file name in most of these cases. We can get past all of their checks. We can set the right agent string. We can have the right IP in place. We can set everything up. But they're going to be checking for the file name. And we found out that, what you can see here is they're not checking the file name. So we want to upload something that's .php into somewhere that's publicly accessible. Then we can upload a web shell and go access that URL, and then we're in. So for this one, when we're reviewing the code, you can see here, they're not checking for extension, which is good news. But then, for the upload directory, they disabled PHP. So we're able to upload a show.php, for example, into that directory, no problem. We can tell it from the code, but it won't execute. So we're going to have to get around that and upload to another directory that has PHP enabled. So we're going to want to use ... as a parent directory, right? So how do we do that? So you can see they've turned the PHP flag off for the upload directory. And it turns out that if you look at the code here, they're appending the IP address of the uploader at the front of the file name. So the file name will look like IP address plus specified file name. And the IP address is not detected. They're getting the IP address from a cookie. And they're not checking that cookie. Okay, so done. Right? At this step, all right, good news. We can get in. What we're going to do is set our cookie, that IP, manipulate the file name. It's going to concatenate the actual file name at the back of that IP address, right? So it's IP concatenate file name. So what we're going to do is we're just going to fulfill all of the criteria, and then we're going to stop the concatenation. And how we do that is with a null character. It's since recently been fixed by PHP, but still a lot of implementations has the older version. And so you can see ... test, right? So parent directory test is where we want to upload. Specify that. Stop the concatenation with a null byte character. Run it against the panel. And go access it. There we go. Okay. So if we can upload a PHP, we can upload any PHP, and basically then we have ownership. Okay, so this is method 22, satisfy prerequisites. We're making good progress. Okay, C2 communications, a lot of times they don't check, but they don't check for anything, but they have a shared key for their communication. So which means if you don't know the shared key, you can't talk to that particular upload mechanism. So what we want to do in this case, very simply, reverse the malware, get our hands on the hard-coded key, or if we're able to get, if we can able to somehow get their source code, we can see the shared key. In this case, we didn't have their source code. We reversed out their malware, got the shared key, uploaded a shell, went back using that shell, retrieved their source code, and verified there it was. It was exactly the key that we used. And we used this against the Godox bot group. It's a 0-day, by the way. Hasn't been talked about yet. Okay. Finally, so we shared a lot of techniques to get ourselves access to the actor infrastructure. And once we found their backdoor that they don't know about, that somebody injected into them. For example, for the Zeus robot group, or we've injected a web shell into the infrastructure, we can then track this actor for a very long time. So lastly, while performing all these operations against their C2 server, we have to understand that most of them place reverse proxies in front of their C2 servers, Nginx reverse proxies, right? So although we're playing with this server, blah, 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 sometimes for correlation, for attribution purposes, we want to know what's a real domain and IP of that particular C2 server. And so how can we do that very quickly? One thing that was successful for us was the set cookie, HTTP response header, right? So in the cookies, if they're setting any cookies, then from the set cookie HTTP response header, you would be able to know the actual C2 server's domain name. And it worked very well for us, for example, for Northern Gold. And this information allowed us to, get to locate Northern Gold's infrastructure and to eventually own their infrastructure and publish a lot of studies on this group. How about their IP address? What worked for us for the Dridex 120 group was PHP info. Okay. A lot of them have some type of PHP info somewhere. If we get it, their IP is there. Okay, conclusion. We have showed you 25 proven threat intel gathering techniques that would allow us to understand who's behind the campaign, who's been targeted, understand infrastructure and tools in use, and this explains why in our research we're able to, disclose all of their tools, their processes, their infrastructures by using these techniques over a long period of time, tracking and doing attribution for the actors. Obtain unreleased malware, which ups our detection efficacy, and understand actor operations and strategies. For example, we showed you screenshots, right, of these actors, the BEC actors, doing their daily business. Most C2 panels contain vulnerabilities. So if you are familiar with these techniques and you spend time, you're going to get a lot of intel. That ends our talk. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.